right, everyone, welcome in Body Movement. I forget what episode we're on. I stopped counting a couple episodes ago, so I gotta eliminate that from my intro. But we're welcoming in today a special guest from the Midwest, I believe, Wisconsin. Northstar Bison always confuses me because I think Northstar, I think Minnesota, which I think you guys do have some land up there. But CMO, co-founder, farmer, rancher, Mary Graese. Welcome to our Body Movement Physical Therapy podcast and health and wellness podcast. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be here.
Yeah, we were just talking a few seconds ago of a list of things I wanted to go through, and I said I don't even know where to start, and I still don't after, even though we just talked off air. And it's, our podcast, as we talked a few weeks ago when I reached out to you, is trying to develop solutions around the healthcare and the wellness fields in physical therapy. That's Allison's, my wonderful co-host and sister here. That's her expertise. And you're tackling a similar thing in health and wellness with, nutrition in the food we put in our bodies. And you own and operate a great reservation with bison that I'll let you intro here in a few seconds. But, there's parallels between just health and wellness in general, where, the health field, there's a lot of marketing and sex appeal in terms of the stuff that's out there that will make people feel better when they're exercising to prevent injury. And what we're trying to do here is say, there's really, the solution is to move your body in primal ways that it was meant to move. And when it comes to nutrition, there's all these fads and all these trends. And, I went through your website yesterday, and, big thing you guys highlight on is as nature intends is your phrases. And it's like everything we have here to eat and fuel our bodies has been here for centuries. And there's not much we need to do besides just take care of it, raise it responsibly, and get it into the hands of people. But there's all the fads, there's all the trends, there's all the food labels, there's all the marketing, there's all the advertising commercials. So I'm interested in just you giving the overview of your operation, quick 2-5 minutes, however long it takes. And then where you are in the landscape of this new world we've kind of entered in the past, I don't even know, probably past 40 years of just competing with good quality information to get the best products to the people at scale, and how you guys are kind of fitting into that realm. And I think there's just been this heavy reset the past decade of people trying to voice out that there are solutions out there and there's ways to combat all this stuff, but it feels like it's disorganized and we're outnumbered by all that sexy marketing and stuff like that. So again, welcome. Would love for you to give that quick 5-minute overview of your bison farm and ranch, because we're going to talk a lot about nutrition in this and sustainable farming and all that good stuff. But and then how you fit into this landscape of an overarching theme that is in our podcast of just kind of breaking down the barriers of good information getting into the hands of the people.
Well, I think it's important to first have everyone understand the role that we identified ourselves at as we came upon this unintended outcome. This was not a goal of ours. It started out as a fulfillment of a dream and a goal that my husband had, and that was to own a couple bison. And he always loved and has been fascinated about bison ever since he was a little boy, and was able to choose the books in library, that he wanted to read. And they were all about how the West was settled. And every one of those books about Lewis and Clark and many other pioneers included or was literally written around an integral part of their survival. And that was the bison herds that they came across on the plains. And the bison have been coined as the general store for the pioneers.
Wow.
Because the bison supplied everything they needed, from shelter to medicine to weapons to water canteens used from their bladders. As the bladders, I should say, were repurposed, as water canteens. They're also called the camel of the plains because they had a little pouch of water, pure, sterile water to resort to when there was no rain and no water nearby. And you know, the Great Plains are not covered with a lot of lakes like where we live. So there were a lot of very dry stints that they traveled across and had to resort to the water that they had, you know, internally, like camels do across a desert.
Yeah, and for shelter and weapons, are you talking about they're using the horns, they're using the bones, they're using the hide to like to canvas their shelters and stuff like that? Like every part.
To build their teepees. They built the teepees out of the bison hides because they were the hide that was most resistant to the negative effects of rain. And you know how leather absorbs water, and then after it dries out, it shrinks, and it shrinks smaller than it was, and now you have big holes in your teepee potential. Bison hides have a different structure. Their fibers are webbed as opposed to linear.
Okay.
And so they don't take on water. In essence, it makes them waterproof or water resistant.
So
minimal pressure.
So this was just something your husband, he was enthralled with the animal. I guess being Midwesterners, he had grown up, he had seen them, he had been taken an interest in them, but you two meet and get married and you're just like, you know, it'd be awesome if we had a couple freaking bison in our backyard.
It actually didn't all start out that way, because when I met him, he owned a health club, and that was to fulfill the dream to be able to just lift weights all day long, because he just absolutely loved being in the gym. And he thought, you know, if I could actually own a gym, then I wouldn't have to work construction. I could just lift weights all day long and have it be my job. Well, and he also had a goal to set an American record in powerlifting in the drug-free realm.
Yeah.
So
which he did, right?
Fulfilled that. Yes.
Yeah.
And so long story short, once he met that goal, then it's like, okay, what else am I going to do now? I've reached my goal. And so that's kind of how things are. You need to move on to the next challenge. And the next goal that he had that was really pressing and desirable was to own a couple bison. So we were just going to do it as a hobby. Yeah. But that very time that we got a couple of them, we had also purchased a farm with his parents and had about 100 acres on it. And well, you know, now we've got this 100 acres. You don't just sit and look at it, because he was a dairy farmer in the past, but did not want to dairy farm in his future. Right. So as a result, we did get a few more bison because we had that extra land. That was really the beginning of it. And after about 3 years, we had enough animals, and I said to him, this hobby has to start making some money, because it was becoming a very expensive hobby.
Right. Yeah. We're going to have to set a few more world records and a few other lifts to pay for this, right? Yeah. Right. Or turn it into money, right? Yeah.
So what I wanted to say, though, about the premise on which we saw our role in this, which answered a few of your questions, and that is, we saw ourselves as students of this great, promising industry. I have a background in nutrition, and that's been my passion all my life.
Yeah, you guys have awesome backgrounds.
And so this has always just been something that's just really been natural and intriguing for me. And we have been very much committed to health and wellness without the drugs and the stimulants that are out there in a lot of venues. And so we chose the path of giving people a platform to be able to train with a drug-free environment, and also understanding the benefits of whole nutrients, the whole food, minimally processed food. So the bison seemed to be just the perfect answer to the anti-red meat movement, which was kind of against the beef at this point. There was a real concern about the unhealthy fat levels in red meat, which we know now is a result of a grain diet, which is not the kind of diet these animals were intended. So our phrase of "as nature intended" really, captures all of this. But the last thing I want to say is that we wanted to be students of this, to learn about the land, but to be stewards of all of the resources, because we don't own it. I mean, we are beneficiaries of God, the creator of this earth, and these animals and this land. And he is the one who has ultimately put this formula in place, and we, as students of it, can grow tremendously and produce a product that benefits humanity in a large way.
Right.
So,
right. And I mean, not only does it benefit humanity, it also is, even if you're acting in your selfish interest, it is actually better for you to consume this stuff, which is great because then incentives align with people's natural ability to just be selfish, but you're not actually, like, by being.
That's not selfish in a negative way.
Correct.
It's responsible.
Correct. Yeah. So that's great. And then I love that your guys' background, you with the nutrition background. I'm sure maybe we'll have to get your husband on. I'm sure Allison would love to talk to him, because Al, I think he set what, the world record or country record for deadlifting, right?
American record. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm most intrigued of, and certainly through his time, what made him prompt, or and same with you from the nutrition side of like, okay, drug-free is the way, right? Because so many, like, the pressure behind that and the pressure behind that in the lifting world is unbelievable.
He almost gave up because he went his very first competitions. He was completely blown away, and he's just like, "What? I'm very diligent. I am very, very dedicated to my training." And he worked as hard as anybody can work in the lifting world. And then he started to learn that the reason that these people are setting the totals that they are, that there is part of their formula was rejection.
Right.
So it's like, okay. So they have a negative, they have an unfair advantage.
Right.
And then just the role of nutrition in performance enhancement. I mean, that's a conversation we can have, very deep.
Yes.
I mean, even in the PT world, yesterday I had a gentleman in here and in with a back pain, and we didn't even really talk about his back. We talked about habits and hydration and food and sleep over exercise that day, because that's actually the story he was telling me. He didn't even focus on his back, but he was like, I know these habits, this and that. And I'm like, okay, a lot of times with pain or performance, all of your habits play a role. So that nutrition side is very, very intriguing to me. And, Matt has told me a lot about you guys. And, I think one of the biggest things, and I know it's on our list, so I might jump you there, is, when we look at what FDA standards are currently in this world, and look at food labels and look at choices that people can make, the more I read, the more appalled I get, and angry, quite frankly, of how, processed, or things like bread comes to mind, like how things are processed, how it actually is impacting our overall health. I think about potassium bromide in breads and how that actually affects the thyroid, and how many people have thyroid issues. So like, from your knowledge, and when you're saying, looking at like the food that you put out, can you shed some light on that of, what our FDA allows, and what prior standards you have set?
Yeah. And I think a good way to get there is kind of the overview that I alluded to earlier is, what is the ranch? Where do you guys operate? How what is the philosophy? And then how does that dovetail into all of these things that you are competing against? But I think it'll be good for our listeners to understand like how the ranch is developed, how it's cultivated, how you guys are very in tune with the animals, how you work on distribution so that everything remains pure, untouched, as close to natural as possible. And then let's get to that. Like, how does that affect what I'm looking at in the grocery store on a label compared to something, businesses and places are doing it the way you guys are doing it?
Well, I think that, first I'll just say that my family and my husband's family both grew up on conventional farms. So we had a huge paradigm shift to go through and continue to go down that path of undoing what we've learned from conventional ag. conventional ag is basically looking at, a piece of land as a canvas that you put everything on top of it to create, and you pray for rain, and you really you underestimate what's underneath that, what you can see, the surface of the soil. And so you put all these inputs in it. Well, we have learned that there is a complete set of, there are so many microorganisms and so much underneath what you see that needs nothing of our inputs, but allowing it to operate with the least amount of disturbance in management. So
Yeah.
we thought we were going into bison ranching, but really we're into grass farming and managing of our fields. And we choose to use our bison to harvest the grass. But our number one objective is to manage the healthiest pastures with the most diverse amount of plants and forbs that would provide this wonderful food for the bison to harvest. So that is what we did. We bought the farm that I'm looking at right now, and I can see a bison herd out my kitchen window and another one out the other window.
That's so cool.
We're talking right now.
Yeah.
And the pasture that they're in right now is just absolutely beautiful. The grass is beyond their bellies. And we have never tilled that land. This was a dairy farm when we moved here, and that was a cornfield, and a bunch of other fields next to it were either corn or oats or soy or something like that. But they were plowed and disked and cultivated and planted and cultivated some more and disked again. And we've never used a single blade of steel on that land since we moved here in 1997. They weren't planted with grass when we moved here. But what we learned is that there is a lot of seed in the seed bed that has not been allowed to grow, which is why it's been treated with Roundup and grass suppressants and pesticides and herbicides and weed killers, et cetera. So this has not had a single chemical added to it of any form since we moved here in 1997. We don't even use Roundup to manage the fence lines. Everything has to be done manually. In fact, that's what my husband's doing today. He's clipping fence lines to keep the fences hot so that they don't short out, from the grass growing up against them.
Right.
So anyway, get back to, we learned that there was this incredible amount of germinated grass seeds in this land. And we put the animals out there, their hooves, their dung and urine, fertilized it. We let them eat what little bit was growing in there, moved them over to the next pasture. And that rotation just stimulated the grass to naturally develop. Right. And so that's what we have today.
Yeah.
Why is that so key to answer your question, Allison? Again, it goes back to as nature intended. The formula, the DNA, those animals have everything they need to produce the right balance of nutrients for us. So we don't have to plug in a chip in their ear, tell them to produce a balance of fatty acids of 4 parts of omega-6s to 1 part omega-3s. And CLAs are really good for us as well, because our brain needs fat. You can't go on a fat-free diet and be well. But we've had a lot of myths out there in the nutrition industry, and I'll never forget the day that the big announcement was made by the FDA, and it was in the late 80s when they said, fat's bad, and all of a sudden the industrial food giants literally turned everything into fat-free this, light this, literally trying to eliminate the fats out of all of these natural foods that had a natural percentage of fat in them. And I can even remember what I was wearing that day because it was so emotional. And I said to the customer I said, mark my words, we are setting ourselves up for an epidemic of autoimmune system disorders and brain dementia and fog. And because they're cutting the fat out of our diet and people are paranoid, they're wanting to be skinny and they think that's the problem. And now we've just deceived and set us on a trend of a whole new set of.
And to make matters worse, that's when that was to cover up sugar. I reference that all the time. That was to cover up sugar, from my understanding. That whole this is by far one of the most irritating conversations I have, because so many people think fat is bad for you, and then in that moment, it was the sugar industry that the vested interest in the sugar industry won. Yes. And sugar production, usage, high fructose corn syrup, you name it, that's when that boomed, and fat was demonized. And you might know more than me because I don't remember that day. I apologize. I was born in '83, so but I talk about that moment often to people. I don't know. Is that the understanding you have, that that's when the sugar was fine? It was identified. It was bad.
There's certainly a lot of things that happened coincidingly, and the whole food industry train wreck, if you want to call it, was from multiple influences. And yes, the sugar industry, the whole thing with soy oil and corn oil and canola oil, having a platform and replacing the palm kernel oil and the coconut oil, that was another whole travesty. So, yep.
Yeah. Right. And that's really interesting that, and again, this is to a couple novices, it's really interesting. Like you don't use steel to cultivate your land. Your bison cultivate the land. This the environmental debate too, with veganism and farming and how much and lab grown meats and all this stuff is to preserve the earth, is the idea that it's going to help our climate. I think they have a great argument because most of what we're eating is industrial farming. That's what gives that argument legs. But we look at somebody like you and your operation, what you're saying is, well, if you just let the animals live off a natural diet and you just kind of manage where they're foraging, they actually, when we say, all these prey type animals come in and devastate all the plant life in an area. Well, actually that's what they're supposed to do. It's just a matter of managing how much they do and moving them to new areas. Cause when they pat down that soil, when they eat all of that and they do their droppings and they're fertilizing that, and then that land recovers. So there's also, now we've thrown in I just threw in the environmental factor, but that ties into what your original statement was. This is how we operate, and it's just a slight management of where they are, but the land is untouched. And like you said, you've actually become more of a plant farmer than a bison rancher, right?
Right. And this also manages the parasites. So, it's not just managing the plants, but we're using the animals to manage their parasite exposure naturally. So it's all about, intensive grazing, and then you move them to another pasture and you give that pasture a rest. And then the sun, the UV light, another thing that we don't consider the importance or the significance of killing the parasites that are left behind now. Yeah. But if they don't have any hosts for 19 days, those parasites are naturally killed. They will die. So if you extend the rest period beyond 19, 20 days of a pasture, then you can move those animals back in there to be safely grazing and not taking on parasites from the remainings. Right. So it's all part of the life cycle. It's beautiful. So, we are regenerative farmers. I should say you're ranchers.
Yeah. And so where's the landscape right now? Because when we talked a few weeks ago, when I invited you on, you talked about kind of your philosophy and all these presentations you're giving, and you guys came up with an acronym, and I don't know if it was you or this cohort you're part of, but it's IDS, right? Where
I love it. You had it in your notes twice. I put it in the notes. Wow.
Yeah. Well,
really that up.
Well, because look, I know. Thank you. Well, because what I'm trying to do with this platform with Allison is we bitch a lot about the healthcare industry and all these quick fads and things, it's important to call out all the bad actors and the trends and the fads and all this shit that comes on our social media and all these influencers pushing like products that and at the end of the day just put in people's mind that there's this quick fix to making your body feel great and not instilling habits. And it's a tougher sell to sell habits to people because you don't see the results tomorrow. And by the way, you never will see the results tomorrow. You got to work on the stuff. So so we do that. We kind of bitch collectively with each other, but then we say, okay, what's the solution? How do we get people, if people see this, know that that's not what they should be looking at, and instead focus. What we do here is we focus on the primal movements of the body, the 6 to 9 primal movement concepts. Move your body the way it was meant to move, and you will naturally kind of alleviate some issues that you see in pain management, injury recovery, avoiding surgery. You know, Allison's got a ton of stories of people that were told they're never going to walk right, and then 6 weeks later they're deadlifting 150 pounds. So
cool.
So we try and focus, while we call out all the bad actors and problems, we try and get to that point of saying, here's success stories on solutions that people are following. So your acronym that we talked about, and I remembered so lovely because I liked it, was IDS, which stands for identify the problem, discuss how you would handle it, and then S is solutions to actually solve the problem. What I love that you said is, I think you made the D a little d in that acronym, because all we do in this country is debate and discuss and complain. And we never, we don't even know if we're identifying the right issue. So are we even talking about the right problem? And if we're not, we'll never get to S, to a solution. So we spend all our time in that middle. So you guys made it really important to make that D lowercase, because we should be talking the least and just doing work to solve the problems. So, you know, I didn't want to steal your thunder on that, but I wanted you to expand on that, on how do we get to this? Where are we in that state today, using that acronym as a tent pole of driving solutions? Is regenerative farming, is it on the comeback? Are you fighting an uphill battle against the industrial farming, which I think you are, but like, where are we in that state? And I think we'll keep getting closer to Allison's question of FDAs and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah, Allison, we don't want to have you feel like your question is important.
It's a
but I realize now that you've brought up something, Matt, that really has my mind going, whoo, I think I need a broom to sweep up everything in the kitchen that landed as my brain exploded with the big I, which is identify. Right. And that's what we're really always trying to focus on, is identifying what problem is, so that you can focus. And another thing to remember is that you can you've heard this old adage before, how do you eat an elephant? Sometimes I have people that come into my office and they're going, oh, Mary, how are we going to get this done? And blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, hey, let me ask you, how do you eat an elephant? And they're just like, where did that come from? I said, you know what? One bite at a time. And so that's literally, you commented about, do we feel like we're fighting an uphill battle with industrialized, the industrialized food system, industrialized ag? It pains me to look at what's happening. It does. But again, then you've got to just, narrow the focus. What can I impact? Recognize what you can control and let go of the rest. And that's the first step of identifying the things that are out of your control, because we spend 95% of our time talking and thinking and focusing on stuff that we can't even control. How much of the day do people talk about the weather? And so right now we're in a drought. So we're tempted to talk about and spend our time on Weather Channel and just pray for clouds and that radar to show like it's going to drop something on us. And there's nothing in the forecast, but it's not something that we can control as far as what's in the sky, but we have to control our management. So that's what we focus on. So first of all, what can you control? And then secondly, who can you impact with what you can control?
Yep.
So yeah, industrialized farming is out there. Fortunately, we have the freedom because regulations allow us to do what we can do to produce these animals the way we are and distribute them. So there's infrastructures in place. There are a lot of positives that allow us to do what we're set up to do and want to do.
Yep.
So that is, I guess that's a nutshell.
Right.
Of,
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to emphasize that.
And we've talked about that in past episodes with Allison. I said, I asked her, how big is this mountain we're trying to climb in tackling the healthcare industry? Because what the healthcare industry has become is turned us into recurring customers. Doctors are incentivized to just keep testing you and keep scheduling follow-up visits, and they're not judged on an outcome base. So, to Allison's point, like, we can't control that. I keep saying, like, how big's the mountain? Or are we like in Shawshank Redemption when Andy Dufresne was digging through a tunnel with a rock hammer? It took him 20 years to escape the prison. I guess that's how you do it, right? Just like you just keep chipping away. And so once we understood that, okay, the healthcare system, which people rely on their insurance, is turned against us, somebody like Allison leaves an accredited practice and she just starts a cash-based practice. No insurance companies. She can work with patients however she sees fit. There's certain guidelines that she's got to meet, of course, and be accredited, but she's not restricted to insurance and billing codes. And she doesn't need a referral. I don't even think. Like, you can just take somebody's, like, my shoulder hurts. They don't have to go to a primary physician, wait for insurance to sign off. She can just get in there and start working with them and just getting them feeling better. So, like, that's a solve. I think that's kind of what you're doing. There becomes those issues of then you're competing in the marketplace with industrial farming, with health insurance, which 90% of America has. So that's where I'm trying to go. It's like, all right, what are you controlling now? Is it making a dent? And do you see, are you seeing that next step at a time as you're eating the elephant? Do you see that next bite available to you?
Yeah. We started out with 100 acres, as I mentioned in the beginning here, with our first farm.
Yeah.
We now are directly managing on, with our small team right here, a little over 2,000 acres that we own part of, and we are leasing the rest.
Yep.
And, our herd is averaging, on that land between 600 and 800. So that's still a small percentage of the animals that that's not enough for us to meet our current market. So we're actually sourcing animals from ranchers that are producing them the way we are and meets our protocol to a T. They have to sign an affidavit agreeing that this is exactly how they're raising the animals, and that then is on file with the state.
Yep.
And those are the things that we're doing to build trust and reinforce for our customers that we're meeting their expectations. And that's another very, very important thing that we do, is to be transparent. We want our customers to be able to trust and not question what we're pulling over their eyes, or the wool we're trying to pull. We're not organic, we're not certified organic, but we are, the true sense of the word, organic to the core.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, that kind of gets into Allison's thing. It's like because you are competing with that. It's, it's that peace of mind that when people go to the grocery store, I think consumers are trying to be mindful about the food they want. They want to buy the healthiest, the most, the best cultivated products, responsibly raised. They do. But we're supposed to be able to trust that those labels, we're supposed to, in a free market society, we're supposed to outsource that knowledge to people like you or the producers or manufacturers to say, all right, it's just a piece of meat with cellophane wrapping on it in a freezer. I have to trust, unless I'm going to go out and start hunting on my own and feeding my family that way and quit my job, a few times a year.
Unfortunately, I wrote on the answer to one of your questions that I have on here. I think it says anything from nutrition standpoint on your listings that can benefit on how to read food labels trust meat displayed at the butcher's or the grocery store. And I said, do your homework. Unfortunately, you do need to look into it, because there is so much, marketers are really savvy about using buzzwords that they know will draw customers to thinking that they're getting what they want. And that's the thing that aches me the most, is the fact that there is so much deception. And so that's a core to who we are as a culture, and our core values as a company is that we're very transparent. We want our customers to be able to feel free to ask questions, but to know that they're getting what they expect. So I spend probably 80% of my time teaching and educating consumers about what is really going on out there. Like the word, free range. Let's pick
I see the pain in Allison's face. Yeah.
Well, I just like, I actually like would love that. Like exactly where you were going. Like, could you, because your farm, I mean, the way that you operate, not even the way that you sound that you operate, the way that you guys operate it, what is not organic about that? Why does it not meet those standards? So can you explain what organic standard is and why
certified organic, and then how
same like pasture, like all these crap, like what we think are now good words. And I'm involved. So I'm pissed right now because these are like the times I get angry with the world. Is like, what I buy organic pastured raised eggs. They're freaking expensive, but I don't care because I don't want crap in them. But is there crap in them? Is there not? Like I want to, so if you go through like the definitions for us peons over here.
And I actually will give the certified organic movement credit for the fact that there is a place for them. And I believe it's in the fruit and produce world, because it is something that is raised on, in the soil that doesn't have a mouth to eat on its own other than the roots, but so there is a place for that certification. However, with animals that are grazing and not necessarily ruminants, but all animals that we're able to raise for meat, there is a dietary advantage to a pastured environment that actually trumps organic. Organic chicken can actually come from a chicken that is called free range, which means that it's raised in a barn and it doesn't even have to go outside. It just has to have the opportunity to go outside through a little door big enough for them to get through. But the outdoor lot doesn't have to have anything in it, no grass, no nothing. It can be just a dirt lot. That is the organic definition for a requirement, I should say, to be able to put organic chicken. And the feed that they're being raised is required to be organic, so certified organic. So that is the difference between non-organic free-range chicken and organic free-range chicken. Our chicken is pasture raised. That means they're outdoors the whole time. They're changing. They have a new place to graze and to eat every 2 days. They're getting a new piece of land. So they're literally being moved through the pasture to eat grubs and bugs and worms. And then they do get a small ration of seeds because they need seeds. They don't have ruminant, they're not a forest animal, so they need higher energy.
Yeah.
And the produce, I shouldn't say the produce, the grasses, et cetera, aren't sufficient for the energy level. So they get some organic grain, but that is the organic chicken that we're raising. To explain about for example, the ruminant animals, which is the one that most correlates with what we raise, and that's bison. But we have farmers that are raising grass-fed beef for us, and elk and lamb. Those are all 100% grass-fed. They are ruminants, four-stomach animals. They weren't intended to live on grain because it's too hot for them, if you want to call it, too much energy in the carbs, too strong. And that's what produces the imbalance of fatty acids that we see and the heavy marbling that happens in the meat from the grain. Now, heavy marbling in the meat is good when it's from a grass diet.
Yes.
So the actual content, the makeup of that fat is what dictates whether it's good for you or not. But we don't certify organic, to answer your question, Allison, because we could. All we would have to do is call the certifying organization and have them come out and do an audit of our land and write up the paperwork and us give them a check for doing it. It will not change the product at all because we fulfill all of the organic standards. And the reason we don't certify it is because it is an unnecessary expense that we would have to pass on to our customers.
I was gonna say, I would pay,
So
I'm paying for that guy to come out and look at your land.
exactly.
And then
So
you cut
we
him
can
a
be
check and I got to pay
transparent.
for it, right?
So we've chosen to be transparent to our customers without an auditor in between. We
Yeah.
have a producer affidavit posted on our website so you can read exactly what our producers are signing off and agreeing to fulfill.
I've read
And yeah, so it's what people expect when they read the word grass-fed. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, just about 3 or 4 years ago, the word grass-fed that used to be, meaning that it had to be 100% grass-fed from birth to plate, now can be the majority of its lifetime on grass,
Right.
50%. Well, science has shown that you can put an animal like this on grain for 10 days and impact the rumen negatively where it is irreversible.
Yep.
You cannot get back to the microbes and the environment of the rumen to process really efficiently all the grass and the forage diet after 10 days only. And like even right now, 95% of the meat that makes it to the marketplace of bison are not grass-fed. They are required by the processor to be on grain 150 days before they make it to market.
And that's, yeah.
And then at the minimum 100 days, but it ranging 100 to 150 days.
And that's 15 times higher than you just said. 10 is enough to change the genetic makeup of the nutrients within their bodies. So you multiply that times 15. Yeah.
There's economic reasons that is,
Right.
established. It's because it produces a consistent product 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And you're in control of the diet, no matter what weather or nature or the climate zone that you're in, you're able to produce a consistent product. So, economically that looks like it's an appealing thing, but we've chosen to not take those controls as part of our model.
Right.
I was just going to say, chime in. I think that I was just like hearing you say to get this label. We actually, my colleagues and I a little bit talk about that from the PT end, and we have like an orthopedic specialty. So I have my orthopedic specialty, and my 10 years was up for that, and I have to recertify. And to recertify, there's X, Y, and Z to do that. And we have this conversation weekly. Like, do we recertify? It's like $800, $900 to recertify for this credential that most people don't even know what it means. And most people actually don't search us for that right now in the PT world, unless they're coming from like a Boston area and they're trying to find a PT practice. And then within our profession, people understand that means you did a little bit more training and passed a really hard test at one point. And then there's all these standards, but you can meet those standards and not be a great practitioner. And you can meet those standards and not do this. So we battle, like, do we pay these dues? Do we pay this and that? And it's just all this money out the door that's annoying and doesn't change how I practice. I always said, like, the process of learning maybe impacted me to get that certification in the beginning, to learn how to research, how to read research, the best, like at the time, 10 years ago, the best practice, but it doesn't mean how I've evolved. So it's just funny to hear that, just again, like those parallels between industries of paying.
Yeah, there truly are.
Which doesn't even mean what's happening, really.
Yes. So. And your testimonies, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The people, your patients, your clients, our customers, their reviews, that's what really speaks the most. And that's why it's so powerful in this kind of e-commerce world. And you're in the referral business. Our business has grown to what it is really because of referrals.
Right.
We never started with a big account at all. We started just with a list. In fact, I pulled out my notebook that I was talking with you about, Matt, a couple of weeks ago that I referenced. It was my Northstar Bison handbook that I started with in 1997.
Wow.
And I had a national co-op directory, which here it is. So you can see.
Very-
And it says
a living artifact.
2000 to 2001 is the version here.
Amazing.
Anyway, it's got, I don't know, maybe 500 or 1,000 addresses in, but I called them one by one, and we little by little got some accounts set up. And so it was just, it grew organically, if you want to call it.
Right.
But we had to take care of our customers in order to keep them coming back to be able to grow from. And that's what your business is about, Allison.
For sure.
The success of your patients and your clients is what's going to continue to fuel the future for you to be able to help more. And that should be the true qualification.
Yeah, I mean, referral, it's trust, it's outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So the trust and outcomes are things that aren't born overnight. We just have two new PTs. Like you have to prove yourself, but you also have to just be a human and be open and transparent about everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And no labels, no anything, just be true about what you're doing and take care of the people you have. There's nothing like it. And in both PT practices I've been in, we almost, I won't say never, almost never paid for any advertising of any way.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's asking people, will you please tell some so-and-so about us? And if you're taking care of people, they will, they'll
Yes.
refer others and
Yes.
you can ask them that, and it continues to grow. I mean, you got a new customer today too. I'll probably just go on and order a bison pack soon here. So bison sampler.
I got her onto bison just by preaching it, but I don't think.
But now I hate everything. I mean, I hate just again like the regulations behind things, like you just said. It's just mind blowing to me. Yeah. And I know like the FDA side of things, like what is approved in the United States versus other countries is or not banned here. What's banned in other countries, I guess the banned list drives me nuts.
Yeah. I have a tough time. I have a tough time with the reconciling this because the more I'm learning about all of this stuff, everything Allison's talking about, everything you're talking about, Mary, what's going on politically and in our financial systems, like there's just, I think the regulations and the certifications and the paperwork and the bureaucracies have all gotten so big that slapping labels on things is what was supposed to be how a producer of a product or service communicates to the market that you can trust this, and it's not the case anymore. It's like the institutions that were there to regulate bad actors have actually been corrupted by vested interests, or so I've become like this very limited government, limited regulation system where I want to just trust you, almost like in an anarchist relationship. And so like, that's the real free market. But then I get concerned of, can bad actors more easily capitalize if that's going to be the route we go? So like that fine balance that's a true free society. The way that we would have a relationship. I just trust that I can go on your website. I can look at it. I take your word for it. You have videos, you have quote unquote receipts of how you do things. So therefore I can say this is even better than the stuff that's being quote unquote regulated, because you guys are regulating it more stricter than they are, and more naturally. So I can trust you more. But does that give the green light to somebody to say, oh yeah, we're just doing it this way and we don't need those labels because that's corrupt, but where they could be pulling the wool over our eyes. So I
think there's a place for everything in that, Matt. However, event, how I got a lot of these little metaphors, but they always say that it comes out in the wash. Bad actors, they make it on the scene, and it's unfortunate that they can dupe people. It's like what should I say? It's the nature of the fallen world. There's corruption.
Yeah.
And so, but the wisdom that we gain through our experiences in life, and just that, it's more about the who than the what in everything. As we're hiring people, we're looking for the who that has the core values. We can teach them what they need to learn. But if they have the right attitude, work ethic, they're honest, they're integrous, they care about what they put their name on. Boy, we can build around them to do anything.
Right.
And so kind of go, okay, I can tell you want to say something.
And you're growing, right? Like your business is growing. It's getting more popular. Like this. So this is the hope, right? So like, as much as Allison's been getting, upset at all the food products she's probably been buying the past 5 years that she's like all up in arms about. But the fact is, businesses like yours, the market is seeking it out. The centralization of the internet and the way information is consumed. People are more skeptical of advertising. I think that is happening, but it's still like, again, maybe we're on the leg of the elephant right now. We have, we're like,
we have a long way to go. We do. But again, I think of the starfish story. I wanted to say, have you ever heard of the starfish story? You guys know the starfish story?
I think
yes,
you mentioned it
I know it very well. I have it.
Yeah.
I have it. Oh, wait. Go ahead. Start telling it.
Well, in a short version of it is this kid is walking on a beach, and the bunch of starfish just got washed up. Hey, there it is. Yes, it matters to this one. So I'll let Allison share it with you. But the tagline of it is his response to somebody that said, "Why are you bothering? There's millions of starfish on this beach. You're never going to get them all back in the water. You're never going to save them all." And he stoops over and he throws another one back in the water, and he says, "It matters to this one, matters to this one." Right. And that's really our focus and our guiding light, if you want to call it. We're just going to do the best we can with who we can impact in our time here.
Yep. And I love that, because it goes to our theme of our podcast. Again, when we talk, we're the B.O.D.Y movement, and B.O.D.Y is an acronym built on developing yourself. And so it goes to individual accountability. You just 20 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, told everyone, you got to do your homework. Sorry, like right now, that's the state we're in. Like, you can't just put your blind trust into these institutions or into these products that you're seeing at the grocery store. You have to read that food label. You have to go home. You have to Google it. And if that doesn't matter to you, that's cool. Just know that you're going to suffer consequences down the road with some sort of autoimmune disease, and if you don't care about that, which is why I don't understand why the food and environmental debate gets so hot. I guess because it's so personal. Like, it's a personal decision. It's very intimate what you're putting into your body. So people don't want to be, lectured or told what they're doing is wrong or harming the world in a bigger way. But to your point, it's like, okay, then I'm just going to put this out there and you do what you want with it. And if we'll let the marketplace of ideas win out, I guess putting that individual responsibility on everyone to keep doing their homework defeats in my mind the purpose of a free market society, where I'm supposed to be able to, I'm an expert in this, you're an expert in this, I can trust you in that. I don't have to do all this due diligence. But I guess as we're climbing a mountain, as we're eating an elephant, like, that's the state we're in right now. Maybe we get to that euphoric state down the road as places like you keep growing and get more exposure, or build a network with other like-minded businesses. I guess that's just the state of where we're at, right?
Well, this is a trend, it's not a fad. It's not going away tomorrow. We're gaining traction. We're growing.
That's great.
And it's fun to have analytics. I love to be able to go and look at what these algorithms have been able to put together for our statistics. But right now, we're at about a 67% repeat customer rate.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. We're growing at a fast, it's gaining momentum. More and more people are excited to have the option to eat what we provide. And so we just are committed to take as good care, I should say, of who we have the ability to feed.
Yeah. And so
I have,
go ahead.
Matt, let me chime in. I got two thoughts. One is this quote that one of my mentors said at one point was, develop a compassion to serve that is greater than the compulsion to survive. And I think in those early phases, and when we think about vested interest, you know, if you're looking to make money, you can make money. You can put fancy things out. Yep. You can scoot by, you know, regulations and do whatever you need to do, make things sexy, make them so people get the marketing world involved. But if it's not true to your roots, and I think that's a very deep conversation for people, you know, that's the medical field. That's, you know, I think anything beyond this. So I think that side of things is what I totally, like you were talking, Mary, and that's what I heard, is that, you know, those people who have the passion behind what they're doing, like there's not going to be more passion than a lifelong dream to own 2 bison that build in, you know, like that's rooted in you. So to me, that was one thing that was really, really just, again, breaking down the lines between industries. And the second, Matt, when you were talking about, you know, when people are caring more and there's a debate, again, like vested in financial interests come into this, right? Because if you're spending a lot of money up front, where obviously we have a huge issue with this, you don't realize that you're going to pay money later if you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you said that, Allison.
Take care of yourself, then who cares?
Yeah.
This is part of my,
that connection I was going to make, because Allison not taking insurance, her patients get a ton of sticker shock when they say whatever, and we don't need to quote your price, but if I got to pay her $1,000,
$195 an hour.
Okay. So if I got to pay her $1,000 for 5 visits, that insurance would otherwise give me for $10 copay, or I got to buy a bison fillet from you at, I'll make it up $30 a pound versus what I could get at the grocery store for $15.99 a pound, which is like, twice as much. And I'm making those numbers up. That sticker shock, people don't understand. There's that the delta there is a cost that you pay on the back end in the form of a tax. And I think that's where you were going to go with that. So I'll let you rant a little more eloquently, but.
No, I have said this for as long as I have been in the nutrition business, and people will comment about, but those, that food is expensive, or that, buying organic or buying these, that quality of food, having a CSA or whatever it is, and some supplements, that's really expensive. And I said, well, the truth is you're going to spend what you're going to spend over your lifetime, no matter what. But wouldn't you rather invest in your health and be well and living a life of vitality the whole time and living and feeling great, as opposed to feeling miserable and being hit at the end with this, tragic illness that wipes everything out?
Right. I think the financial education is also if we just want to throw another messed up institution into this, but the financial education in the country is that value proposition, that calculation, people can't, I don't even know if they can quantify it or visualize it in their head, what they're saving, because they don't see it right now, and they don't understand how they're feeling right now is not going to be the way they feel in 10 years. It's a tougher sell. It's a truer sell. It's a more honest sell. How receptive the market is, I don't know. Like, do you have to see all your older aunts, uncles, and parents getting sick, and they're like, see, that's going to be you if you keep doing all that stuff. But
that's also the society norm. So,
right. But I tweeted today on Twitter. I said if you overpay for quality,
on?
What's that?
You're still on?
Yeah, I'm still on. I said if you overpay for quality real food, you'll underpay in both time and money for healthcare in the future, right? So people don't understand also the time that if you get sick because you're not eating right, or you're investing in the wrong products, or you're doing a fad workout that's actually deteriorating your joints and your bodies, not only are going to pay more for healthcare in the future, but those are visits, those are car trips, those are follow-up visits, those are phone calls that are eating away your time from doing other things. I think I just sold it, but I don't know why it doesn't resonate harder. Is there a better way to do it that you guys are seeing effective? Again, you're growing, so I guess the message is resonating. Is it just amplifying it more, finding more like-minded people, building? I don't, how do you?
You know what, Matt? It's just living out what you just said.
Yeah.
That's because ultimately people see
I know.
your actions and your example is what just reinforces what you said, or it completely contradicts what you said and you have no integrity. So just live out what you said.
Yeah.
That's what you can do. That's who you can impact. You're on this platform. There's a lot of opportunities these days to get this message out.
Yep.
And people have to hear something 7 times before they really start to take action on it. So don't lose heart.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly why I'm on social media still. Cause like, I don't care if 4 people see this or 100 people or whatever, like, I'm just going to keep peppering it. And maybe the one message that doesn't resonate with Mary will resonate with the person that we just had on that's reforming education for the youth. We had him on a month ago. Like maybe that lands with somebody, this will land with somebody else. And then you start building that community of like, okay, these guys are saying something differently. Right. So, okay. All right. Well, that's good encouragement for me. Cause it's like, I want to else is all this other stuff that is selling. That's not beneficial to people, but it's selling well, and it gets a lot of likes or gets a lot of views or gets a lot of business short term, and then it kind of dies off, and then a new thing comes in. And I guess we're people like us, Allison, it's just this steady thing. And I get impatient. I want to see that spike of like the mental collective click in society being like, what, geez, we just got to get behind these people. I guess that it will come. I guess I'm just looking at the elephant and I'm just like, man, okay, yeah, one bite. All right, one bite, So that's where I get with this stuff. But the results will speak for themselves over time. And I guess that's the harder thing. You're telling people, just trust us, right? Just trust us. And you guys have the blueprint, you guys have receipts. So it becomes easier and easier, I guess, for you guys over time, because you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. There definitely are different phases of growth and emphasis that, you do have to invest, but if it was easy, everybody would be trying it.
Right.
So, it definitely is a test of fortitude, passion, true commitment, diligence, and then just being patient. This is what you call slow food. It takes 30 months to get a bison from, being from its birth to a prime age that would now be ready to harvest for your table.
Yeah.
And so that's a long time.
Yeah.
And you do have to just pace yourself, but stay the course.
Yeah.
Keep the message.
Last 10 minutes here, I'd love to just talk about other solutions. So how you're doing what we're doing, you're collecting, and now you're doing it more direct. Like I'm connecting with people in every walk of life for our podcast. If you're doing great in education or politics or finance or health and nutrition, you kind of alluded to it. You guys have built kind of a network with other farmers, and this is part of the solution, right? It's like, okay, I've found other people that are raising their harvest, whether it be elk or rabbit, I think you guys sell, and beef and chicken and turkey. You're finding those farmers, and whether you have them on your land or not, that are doing it your way, but don't have the distribution channel set up, right?
Yes.
So you're like, all right, why don't we, I guess we talked about this, those guys, well, many of them, even though they raise them correctly, to get distribution now have to go through industrial farming, right? Yes. And so then all of their meat gets mixed in with all the other bad quality meat, and it just negates everything that they've worked for and raised those animals. Especially the small ones. There are some co-ops that you have that have the ability to control and preserve their standard, to be under a certain label. Right.
However, the majority of them, and what we saw happening, and once we got our meat out there and had customers coming back to us, and then they would say, do you know anyone that I could get such and such from? I'd really like some grass-fed lamb, but I don't know who to go to.
Right.
What about some, good, some grass-fed beef or pastured pork? Well, anyway, one by one, we started a network with local farmers who have the infrastructure and the passion and the know-how, but don't have an outlet. And let's be honest, farmers don't like to sell their own product. They would just rather take it to the sale barn or take it to the hub where all the product comes through and sell it to them for the price that's the going price for the day. So they're price takers. And then they can't make it on that. So they've got to work off the farm as well, have full-time jobs in town. That's really what the egg community looks like right now. The small family farm is not making it on the farm. They have to have an outside income. Their farm is a hobby. Very, very few farms that are what we consider a family farm today are actually making it on their economically.
So you guys have become a resource for those small farmers because you have the distribution and the reputation, right? So this is part of your solution.
Quality, and we give them a premium price. We pay them more than they would have been paid at the sale barn because their product is superior. It meets our standards. We're able to add it to our choices. So I looked at, this is the marketing side of it. I looked at how can we grow our business? Well, let's say we have 100 people buying our bison. If those 100 people, they very likely would eat other grass-fed meats, other grass-fed products, or whole organic and naturally raised products if they had that to choose from, because they're not just strictly bison consumers.
Right.
So we increased our selection, and then we became the one-stop meat shop. So now, people can buy all of their meats at one time efficiently online from us and not have a lot of shipping, so it reduces the amount of carbon spent, to get the product to them. Everything is more economical and efficient.
I love that solve because that's something now while we said to consumers earlier, do your homework. And while our podcast is built on developing yourself at the individual, there's also a second track where Allison's like, well, we're being a little harsh on patients and customers. We're saying you have to educate yourself on how the body moves and stuff. But to Allison's point, she wants to be more tough on healthcare providers to say, don't push back against doing that unnecessary test that's going to give you information that's not going to change the way you're going to treat that patient. Just treat the patient in front of you. Don't go down this road of protocols just to get them in your office 5 more times. Similar, that's kind of, and I don't know where the parallel is for us, Al, to do that with other doctors. I guess you're in those little cohorts and groups that are trying to get the message out, but that's something where you're not that you're being tough on other farmers, but you're providing an outlet for them to make the choice to provide the consumer with, hey, make a better decision with your product. Don't just take it to the hub. Come through us and your work will be paid for and then some, and then people will likely come back over time. So we're trying to make that parallel of being tough on healthcare providers. Be better. Don't just schedule that follow-up visit because that's what everyone else is doing and you'll get that patient in there one more time. Give them the best.
I think that's where the mentorship group that I'm part of, the first principles of movement mentorship, that is what you're talking about, is almost like what you're doing. To me, the FPM world is the hub, and it's saying we're calling all these shots. There's a few people who are really leading the charge, and it just builds momentum with us. So it helps us to be able to be like, oh my God, what is going on, and share that in a safe place with other people who feel the same way, and say, how do you guys counteract this? How do you counteract when somebody is seeing 5 different people and being told they need surgery when they're clearly improving? And so the strength in numbers of the like-minded people is where, that's the parallel I'm making. And for me, that's nutrition groups. Go ahead.
It's about ethics. It's about
Yeah.
choosing your friends. You know, I mean, who are
Yeah.
you influenced by? You know, we're
Right.
influenced by and we influence. So
Yeah.
who do we
Right.
want to network with? Who do we want to be associated with? And
Yeah.
it's all of that. It's a real layered
Yeah.
um,
Again, now with the long-term approach, do you think what you're doing in building this network can save the small family farm? Do you think it will reinvent how we think about farming here in America? Because on the other side, I see lab-grown meats and, you know, Beyond Meat and all these plant-based solutions that are being, you know, scientifically and synthetically grown. And I'm like, I don't trust that at all, really, to tell you the truth. Even though, and those stocks and those IPOs are going crazy and they're taking off. But will efforts like yours, do you think do you see more people doing it across the country with distribution centers like yours? And do you think that is one of the first steps in bringing back farming? Or how do you see like farming changing over the next, 10, 20 years?
right. You know, statistically, the small family farm is still shrinking.
Yep.
However, the operation of the small family farm is shifting, and it's getting healthier, if you want to call it. It's the regenerative model of what we talked about for what we're doing here, and the no-till planting. You know, even if they're doing monocrops. I just was across the state here on Monday I had to go on about a 3-hour trip, you know, to eastern Wisconsin, and I was shocked at the amount of no-till planting that there was in farms that, you know, have crops.
Yeah.
So that was a huge encouragement. So there's little indicators of the transition going to what is really healthier for producing crops, understanding the vitality and the incredible power of the soil itself.
Yeah.
So I would have to say that there's hope. There's positive signs. There's small family farms that are producing small amounts, but the quality of it is better than it has been. So, you know, the pendulum is swinging.
Yeah.
Again, it's all determined by the consumer, because the consumer drives this ship. The dollar is what will drive all of these things. So, yeah, you said that, you know, Beyond Burger and the plant-based proteins that are being put out now, that there's a huge, I don't know, excitement about the possibility, because there's just been this ongoing momentum being built to get away from animal proteins. But when it comes right down to the health issues that are showing up all over for people that are organic, vegetarian and vegan especially, you can't, you are not living your best, and you're not feeding your body as it needs to be without that balance of proteins coming from meat as well as
I see. I only see an argument from the environmentalists in the veganist world because of the industrial farming and the way the animals are treated. If again, now this is just personal opinion, but if you're somebody, it's like, I'm doing it for the environment or I'm doing it for ethics, those are two different arguments to me. The environment, I'd say, I would argue you're misguided, because veganism would require tearing up the land and tearing up soil and all the insects that feed birds and prey animals that feed off of that land. So you're disrupting the ecosystem that way. So the environment argument never has held water to me, in that the argument of ethics in terms of how animals are treated actually does, because industrial farming doesn't treat their animals well. So that's where I think you guys would take over. It's like, not only is our way better for the environment, because animals like the bison do tamp down and fertilize the soil and then move on and forage. And then that land regenerates and it comes back better and richer the next time.
Absolutely.
But the way you guys treat the animals, that's where you can debunk that other argument around ethics. That is grounded, I do think, grounded in a good debate stance, because industrial farming doesn't treat their animals well. So that debate, it's like a little love triangle. It's like, well, you guys are doing it right, they're doing it wrong. So those who are taking the ethical stance are only fighting, the big industrial guys, where if they looked at somebody like you and ate their products, the argument goes away. So, that's more of that education. But it's like the curveball. It's the curveball. While you're competing with industrial, now you got the consumer over here that's going to justify what goes on in the market, and they might associate you guys with environmental damage when that's not the case.
No, not. It's actually the opposite. And so, I like to say we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, so there's problems with animal products that are not raised right, but it's not the animal's fault. They themselves are exactly what we need, but how they're managed is the problem.
Yes.
And so what we really need, this is another whole scope on itself, but the desertification of the planet right now is a very serious problem, and being considered, as a major contributor to starvation and hunger, and that it's growing. And what it actually takes to reverse desertification is grazing animals. Nothing reverses desertification and loss of topsoil and erosion like grazing animals does. Right. So are you familiar with the Savory Institute?
Nope.
Okay, holistic resource management?
Vaguely.
Okay, if you just look those up online, you'll just get an education of it unto itself about the incredible power of animals to reverse desertification and increase the pounds per acre and the literally return on your investment, because that's what it's about.
Yep.
ROI, what do you get back for what you put in?
Yep.
And if you were to harvest the protein that just grazed on that land, that goes a lot. I don't have the statistics, my kids, Marielle and Sean would, but the amount of return to your body's nutritional needs is many times greater than the peas or the corn that might grow, that you would eat in the form of vegetables that are not a complete protein, that you have to combine and still don't replace animal protein.
Right. And then I guess the last point that I'll dovetail with that in solving the problem. So let's say the market starts grasping this idea that the regenerative farming model is the way to go, and people get behind your products, start buying them. What about scalability? Can this model feed a nation of people? Which I think is one reason the industrial farming market took off, decades ago, is like, we can scale and operate this, and we can get it to you the next day. And, for the most part, it still does have some nutritional value. We're not just dying from it, the minute we eat it. So, can the model that you're doing, is it more that we'll have maybe peaks and valleys throughout the year of what, almost like fruits, like what's in season and what's not from an animal standpoint, and that we need to kind of build that more of a holistic ecosystem on what type of animals are in season and when, and price controls and stuff like that?
Well, I love the fact that you brought that up, because we just had an experience a year ago, just over a year ago, when the centralization that was propelled by the industrialization of our egg and industry created a catastrophe in our country. We didn't have any processing plants that could harvest animals. Remember when the slaughter plants were shut down to COVID?
Yes.
And there was we had hundreds of thousands of animals that were ready for market that couldn't go to market, that were euthanized because there was no place to slaughter them.
A lot of pigs, right?
Plants were absolutely. And my brother was one of them. And because I grew up on a conventional hog farm, and he had he's part of a co-op. He had 1,600 hogs that were ready for market on March 13th, 2020. And we have like a family call every weekend. And just to talk about how everybody's doing and take care of my dad and just stuff like that.
Right.
And it happened to be that the subject was all about my brother's problem that day. And we all came together and it's like, what are we going to do? You can't euthanize 1,600 hogs. It will destroy your livelihood and et cetera.
Right.
Anyway, neat story is that because we own our own slaughter plant and we're vertically integrated, we were able to slaughter those hogs for him, and he found outlets for all of them to be butchered through small butcher shops.
Yeah.
We've got to keep it decentralized, and that's the model that we have right now that can be duplicated thousands of times throughout our country. We don't want to be, we can't scale and do a good job with what we're able to do at the scale that we're at right now, and we recognize that.
Right. This is the argument why people always say buy local, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
For every dollar that you spend on a local business or product, it is recycled 7 times. So your return to the community is 7-fold of what you spend to buy and support a local business or product.
Right. Yeah,
that's huge.
It's huge. Yeah, it's hugely impactful, and people push it. So I'm glad to see that, that is, and for the, even at Whole Foods, they'll label, hey, this is locally grown. This is locally, sold here. It's product of New Jersey. So that's encouraging to see that even some of like your bigger retailers and stuff like that will push and label things as local, because that seems highly beneficial. And I think the local farmers, I was listening, I think his name is Joel Salatin.
Yes.
I'm sure you guys might even know each other, I'm sure.
Yes, we do.
He was on Joe Rogan's podcast,
Yes.
where he was saying during COVID, it was the local farmers that actually did well.
Very well. And we, honestly, not that we would ever wish upon anything in this planet again to have what happened with COVID.
No.
But our business was able to serve people when their grocery store shelves were empty.
Yep.
And within a couple months, our business exploded 500% because we had product and we were able to process and we were able to fulfill orders. So many places just ran out of inventory because they couldn't get it processed. And we were in control of all of those stages. So we raised the product. We have our slaughter plant. We have our own processing facility and distribution division as well. So from basically birth to plate, we have it. Our business model controls all of the steps. Yeah.
Okay. So, again, I've gone on the roller coaster through the 90 minutes here. It's just like there's just like, oh man, there's the huge hill to topple, but there's been, you have countered every problem we've been talking about in the identify. Like you're like, we're solving. It's just like, it's going to be this burn. And, that's encouraging to see. I think markets and consumers are going that way. I still think the new plant-based and synthetic stuff will be a challenger in the future. But again, like as long as we're identifying that, we can discuss it and solve it. Right. So, it's very cool to see. I don't know, Al, if you have anything else, but this is great and informative. We'll put all of this stuff in on YouTube hopefully next week, and link to your company's website. And if there's anything you want to share, just send it our way. We'll put it in the comments on anything that we share over social media and stuff like that. But enlightening conversation. It's been something I've been a customer of you guys for a few years now. You've fed our dog for many years before we lost him earlier this year, and you fed us, and you got me to sell the Bison product to Allison up there. And whether she's bought from you guys directly or not, she's gotten interested into the Bison burger and stuff like that. But we're due for a reorder too. But thanks for joining us and sharing that. It's encouraging to see how other people are doing. That's why I wanted to start the podcast, how people are doing it in other industries, how we can apply that and message continuously as we put out core content that we're talking about in healthcare and PT with Allison stuff. And again, I'm just the curious guy that's here just asking questions. So like Allison's always correcting me like every third sentence in a podcast, and or just
really withheld today.
Yeah. Right.
I think all of these things, I mean, and again, just the parallel is just, to change something that's been there for so long, takes people with passion and just takes time.
Yep.
And trying to continue to get the message out. Thus, the birth of our podcast. Thus, of everything, but like that slow cook. I love the elephant analogy. I can get fired up really fast and really angry at just society and world because of just not taking care of people well. But again, part of the solution versus, adding to the problem is kind of
it's good to get fired up for like a minute and then internalize it and say, okay, now this is a calling to me to solve.
Now what can I do?
Yeah. And Allison, if you're interested, we have brochures that you could actually put into your office or your facility there. That would be like a nice transition for you to be able to reference and say, hey, if you guys are looking for a source, for some excellent protein to heal your body and nurture your recovery.
Set it up.
That'd be great. So I would love to get your contact. Great. That would be great.
Yep, I'll send you. I would absolutely love that. I think, any of that. I mean, I talk about it enough with my very baseline knowledge that to spread the message and share, I would love to. Yeah. Okay.
And I have a really short article that's called Why Grass-Fed is Better Than Organic. It was written by Joe Robinson, who has a website called eatwild.org. And it's basically a clearinghouse of how to understand all this data about the difference between grass-fed and grain-fed proteins.
Yeah, great. Email us that link, and we'll put it up on YouTube and
it's on our website as well. So
great.
I'll connect you with some other key connections, and I've got a few other things I'd love to share with you in an email that we've got coming down the pipe.
Yeah, we're that, and again, what we do with the podcast is like, again, I'll cut up 5-10 minutes of this and sprinkle it out on our social over the next probably 6 months. Like, oh, you know what? I haven't. Next week we'll definitely say, hey, the episode's out. But then, 4 weeks later, I'll be like, you know what? This resonated with me. I want to make sure people heard this part of the conversation that maybe didn't listen to the whole thing. So. Sure. Any resource that you have, we can include it in the comments of our episode, and people can just have it there living in perpetuity.
Sounds great. Well, it's been a great pleasure. As you can tell, none of us ran out of words, and we could talk all day, I think.
I think I could go for another 30-40 minutes easy, but we'll get on with the day. There's enough discussing. It's time to get out there and solve. So we'll disconnect and
all right,
and move on.
Love it.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a wonderful day. God bless you both. Have a great summer. Bye-bye.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.